You're tuned in for another deep dive. And today, we're venturing into territory that touches so many lives, really, directly or indirectly.
Yeah, definitely.
We're unpacking How to ADHD, an insider's guide to working with your brain, not against. Think of it like getting the inside scoop, straight from someone who actually navigates the world with ADHD every single day.
Right, it's not just abstract, it's grounded in lived experience.
Exactly. It feels more like a practical toolkit, packed with research-backed strategies, personal stories, and just this powerful sense of, okay, that makes sense.
Absolutely. And our goal with this deep dive really is to pull out those crucial insights from the guide, give you a rapid but still thorough understanding of what it truly means to live with ADHD.
And maybe more importantly, how to work with that reality, not just fight against it all the time.
Yeah, precisely. The book's mission feels like it's about empowerment through knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Offering those like light bulb moments that can shift how you see yourself or maybe someone you care about.
Oh, definitely prepare for a few of those light bulb moments. We're going to tackle why that name attention deficit is, well, almost laughably wrong sometimes.
Yeah, it really is.
And the fascinating power of hyperfocus. It's definitely not a deficit. It's just very selective.
Super selective.
We'll explore how time can feel like this really fluid thing, what actually drives motivation, which is surprising the everyday impact of, just forgetting stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The propensity of emotions, the complexities around social interactions, and then that whole journey towards self-acceptance and like becoming your own best advocate.
It's a lot to cover, but really valuable stuff.
Okay, so let's dive in, maybe challenge some assumptions.
Let's do it. And let's start right there with that big misconception. The author argues pretty compellingly, I think, that attention deficit just paints a completely inaccurate picture.
Right. It's not really a lack of attention at all.
No, it's more about a difficulty in regulating where that attention goes, directing it.
Yeah, it's like having this, Ferrari brain, but with bicycle brakes when it comes to choosing what to focus on.
That's a great analogy. You can lock onto something that really grabs you. A passion project, a deep conversation with this intense, laser-like focus, hyper-focus.
Sometimes shutting out everything else, right?
Totally. But then trying to shift that focus onto something that feels, well, maybe boring or meaningless.
Yeah, less sparkly. It becomes this like Herculean effort. It's exhausting just thinking about it.
And this is where understanding the different presentations of ADHD is so important. The book lays out primarily inattentive, primarily hyperactive impulsive, and the combined type.
Crucial point, because the absence of that sort of visible physical hyperactivity doesn't mean ADHD isn't there.
Exactly. Someone might be struggling massively with focus, with organization, but they aren't bouncing off the walls.
That's such a key takeaway. We often have this really narrow image, usually that fidgety kid.
Right.
But as the author points out, hyperactivity can show up differently. Maybe it's constant talking, verbal hyperactivity.
Or even just this internal mental restlessness, like a mind that just will not quiet down, always buzzing.
And these types aren't necessarily fixed either, are they? They can change over a person's life.
That's right. They can evolve.
Yeah.
And importantly, the book really tackles the stigma around ADHD. It's significant. The author's own story, struggling to get diagnosed for years, even while seeking medical help, it just highlights how these societal misunderstandings create real barriers.
Barriers to even talking about it, let alone getting support.
Yeah, that fear of judgment, right? Being dismissed or labeled by bosses, teachers, even doctors sometimes.
It forces so many people to just try and manage these really significant challenges alone in silence.
It really does.
Okay, so it's way more complex than just not paying attention. Let's get into some of the underlying mechanisms. Executive function.
Yes, exactly. Executive functions, that's like the brain's management system, right? The skills that help us plan, organize, manage time, control impulses, all that stuff.
And the book explains how impairments in those areas are like a core feature of ADHD.
Definitely. Take response inhibition, for example.
Response inhibition. That's basically the mental pause button, stopping yourself from blurting things out or acting on the first impulse.
Pretty much, yeah. The book gives relatable examples like shouting out an answer in class or maybe oversharing personal details.
I mean, we've all probably done that occasionally, but for someone with ADHD, managing those impulses is just consistently harder.
Much harder. And these executive function struggles can easily lead to that feeling of just being totally overwhelmed.
Snowed under.
Yeah. And the author gives some really solid advice here. Start by doing less.
Okay, interesting. Not more.
No. Less. Focus on building skills step by step, incrementally, instead of trying to overhaul everything at once.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like trying to climb Everest in one go. You got to build up to it.
Exactly. And the book uses this really vivid personal story about the author working as a server, when a part of the job that was usually automatic suddenly required conscious, like manual effort because things got stressful. It threw off the whole system.
Wow. So even routine things become hard work when that executive function is overloaded.
Precisely. It shows it's not about a lack of effort or willpower. The brain is just operating differently under that load.
Which kind of leads us nicely into another fascinating area the book covers, the experience of time. They call it time blindness.
Yeah, time blindness, or sometimes time nearsightedness. Sounds a bit dramatic, but it captures something real.
So what's the core idea? How is time different?
Well, basically, folks with ADHD often experience this disconnect from the, steady linear flow of time that many neurotypical people just take for granted.
So it's not just ticking along evenly.
Not always, no. Time can feel incredibly elastic. It might drag on forever for boring tasks.
Oh, I remember that feeling from school.
Right. Or it can just vanish in a blink when someone's hyper-focused on something interesting. Hours feel like minutes.
The book mentions that childhood memory, right? Homework supposed to take 15 minutes ends up feeling like hours and hours.
Exactly. We can all relate to time dragging sometimes, but for someone with ADHD, this kind of distorted sense of duration can be a daily, constant reality.
And it's not just about time passing in the moment, is it? It's about the future, too.
Right. Prospective memory that's remembering to do things in the future, that can be a huge hurdle.
Like missing appointments, forgetting to take your meds, walking out without your keys or your jacket again.
All classic examples. But it's not all doom and gloom. The book offers really practical strategies.
Okay, good. Like what?
Things like using visual timers. An analog clock, apparently, can give a more concrete sense of time passing than just digital numbers.
Interesting. Makes sense visually.
Scheduling those vague, later tasks into actual specific time slots. Creating regular routines or time pillars throughout the day.
Like anchors in the day.
Exactly. And using external deadlines. Sometimes you need that external pressure to create urgency.
The book also touches on Chronos versus Kairos time.
It does, yeah. Chronos being that clock time, linear, measurable. And Kairos is more about, like, the right moment, the opportune time.
And the suggestion is that the rigid Chronos structure of modern life can be especially tough for ADHD brains.
That seems to be the idea, yeah. Less natural flow, more fighting against the clock.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Motivation. This is a huge one, impacts everything.
I guess so.
And the book has a really key insight here. What actually gets an ADHD brain moving isn't necessarily what we'd expect.
That's so true. Unlike neurotypical brains, which might be driven by importance or long-term rewards.
Yeah, I should do this because it's important.
Right. For ADHD, motivation is often sparked by what the author calls INUC.
INUC. Okay, break that down.
Interest, novelty, urgency, and challenge. If a task doesn't have at least one of those elements,
it feels almost impossible to start, even if you know it's important.
Exactly. The activation energy required is just enormous.
And the book talks about dopamine's potential role here, right? The reward chemical.
Yeah, the theory is that differences in dopamine regulation might make it harder to feel rewarded by tasks that aren't immediately engaging or stimulating.
So less inherent reward for doing the dull but necessary stuff.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Which leads to this concept the author calls the wall of awful.
The wall of awful. I think I know that wall.
Yeah. It's that massive feeling of resistance, the emotional weight you have to push through just to start a task that doesn't naturally pull you in.
But there's a hopeful bit, too, this idea that action can come before motivation sometimes.
Yes. The cartoon gravity idea, like Wile E. Coyote running off the cliff. He doesn't fall until he looks down.
So just starting, even mechanically, can sometimes get the ball rolling.
It can. Just taking that first tiny step can generate momentum and maybe even spark some interest you didn't feel initially.
And the book gives practical ways to tap into those INUC drivers, right? To kind of game the system.
Absolutely. Like literally making tasks into a game. Finding the right level of challenge, not too easy, not too hard.
The Goldilocks zone.
Yeah. Tying tasks to your personal interest if possible.
Yeah.
Even just removing physical barriers like putting your running shoes right by the door.
Reducing friction. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And the do it for her concept, linking it to a deeper value.
Yeah, connecting the task to something or someone you care deeply about can be a really powerful intrinsic motivator.
Okay, now, Let's talk about something we all grapple with, but maybe more intensely. Forgetting things.
Ah, yes, memory. Or lack thereof sometimes.
The author even jokes about forgetting to put the chapter on forgetting into the book about ADHD.
Which is just perfect, isn't it? It perfectly illustrates the point.
Totally. So the book explains working memory's role, that mental sticky note.
Exactly. Working memory is about holding and manipulating information in your mind for short periods. And in ADHD, it's often less efficient. Fewer kind of mental slots available.
Especially for verbal or auditory stuff, things you hear.
Yeah, that seems to be a common challenge. And the book distinguishes between cued recall and free recall.
Okay, difference being?
Cued recall is remembering when you get a prompt, a hint. Free recall is just pulling information out of thin air spontaneously.
And free recall is the tough one for ADHD. That out of sight, out of mind thing.
Very much so. If it's not right in front of you, it might as well not exist sometimes.
This is why external aids are like non-negotiable, right?
Absolutely critical. The book hammers this home. Use calendars, reminders, to-do lists consistently. Create visual cues in your environment. Use technology.
Lean on the external brain.
You have to. But there's a little upside mentioned too, the joyful rediscovery, when you find something you completely forgot you had.
The silver lining of forgetfulness. Okay, let's move into emotions. This is maybe less talked about, but super important.
Definitely. Emotion dysregulation is common in ADHD. It's not just the hyperactivity. It's feeling emotions really intensely.
And maybe having trouble managing those intense feelings.
Exactly. Big reactions, quick shifts. And it's not just negative emotions. Even joy or excitement can feel overwhelming sometimes.
And the book mentions that because those intense emotions might have led to negative feedback in the past.
Right. People might learn to just try and suppress or avoid feelings altogether, which isn't healthy long term.
But the crucial point the book makes is that all feelings have value, right? They give us information.
Yes. There are no bad feelings intrinsically. It's more about learning to respond to them in helpful ways, allow them, interpret them.
That takes practice. The author shares a really intense personal story about suicidal ideation shifting rapidly.
Yeah, it's very raw, but it powerfully illustrates just how quickly and intensely emotions can fluctuate.
Which leads us into social dynamics, because those core ADHD traits can definitely make social situations tricky sometimes.
For sure. Things like impulsivity, difficulty waiting your turn, maybe tuning out if the conversation isn't grabbing you.
Yeah, those can lead to awkward moments or misunderstandings. The book also talks about rejection sensitivity.
Rejection-sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. That heightened sensitivity to perceived criticism or rejection. It's not officially in the diagnostic criteria yet, but many people with ADHD strongly identify with it.
So you might misinterpret neutral cues as negative. Assume the worst.
Exactly. And that can really strain relationships, jumping to negative conclusions about what others think.
The book also has a nuanced take on empathy, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests that while people with ADHD can be incredibly sensitive to others' emotions, feeling what they feel, they might still struggle with cognitive empathy, like fully understanding someone else's perspective.
Missing cues, maybe being preoccupied internally.
Right, and it contrasts that deep, engaging big talk many with ADHD love with the sometimes necessary but often challenging small talk.
Oh, the agony of small talk sometimes. The book also mentions unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, both of ourselves and of others in social settings. And maybe a scarcity mindset in relationships, feeling like you have to cling desperately to any connection.
But the core message seems to be about authenticity, right? True belonging comes from being yourself, not trying to squeeze into some mold.
Absolutely. And consistency over intensity. Building strong relationships through regular, smaller moments of connection, not just intense bursts.
And shifting focus from just making friends to finding your people through shared activities you actually enjoy.
Yes, letting connection happen more organically around shared interests.
So building on that, the book offers some concrete steps for actually improving relationships.
It does. It starts with self-reflection, knowing your own strengths, what you genuinely bring to a friendship or relationship.
Knowing your value.
Exactly. And then actively seeking out those environments and activities where you're likely to find your people.
And reminding us that social skills aren't fixed, they can be learned, even as adults.
Yes, it's really helpful. And a practical tip, if you know you miss subtle cues, it's okay to ask people for more direct communication.
Just be upfront about needing clarity. I like that. And the idea of interfacing instead of masking.
Yeah, it's about finding ways to connect authentically without totally exhausting yourself trying to pretend you're neurotypical. Finding that middle ground.
Making time for connection, having go-to people for different things, and crucially, communicating boundaries clearly.
Super important. Respectfully letting people know what works for you and what doesn't.
The author's own journey, questioning the point of friends and then realizing that deep need for belonging is really powerful too.
It really resonates. It's a fundamental human need.
Okay, now a really critical layer the book addresses, intersectionality.
Yes, so important. ADHD doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Right. It intersects with gender, race, class, sexuality, other identities, and that massively shapes someone's experience.
Absolutely. And potential discrimination, too. Plus, co-occurring conditions are common anxiety, depression, sensory issues, chronic pain.
And those interact with ADHD, making things even more complex. The book touches on substance use sometimes being a coping mechanism, too.
It does. And societal expectations, cultural values, they all add extra layers of challenge depending on your specific context.
It really drives home that a one-size-fits-all approach to understanding or supporting someone with ADHD just won't cut it. You have to see the whole person.
Precisely. Which leads into the final big theme, empowerment and advocacy.
Yeah, bringing it all together, encouraging self-awareness, getting a professional diagnosis if possible to understand all the pieces.
But also stressing that even without a formal diagnosis, using strategies that help you is totally valid. You don't need permission to make your life work better.
Finding community is key too, right? People who get the specific intersections you're dealing with.
Hugely important. That feeling of shared understanding, like in the keynote story the author shares, is incredibly validating. It goes beyond just the label.
And the big shift in perspective. It's not about overcoming ADHD, like it's some battle to be won.
No, it's about self-acceptance, learning to work with your brain, partner with it, rather than constantly fighting against its nature.
And the book really champions opening up the conversation about neurodiversity for everyone's benefit.
Yeah, normalizing different ways of thinking, pushing for accommodations, universal design in schools and workplaces. It helps everyone.
It ends with this call to action, right? Become an advocate. Be the person you needed when you were struggling.
Imagine better futures. Join existing efforts. Share your story if you feel comfortable. It all makes a difference.
So wrapping up this deep dive into how to ADHD, that core message really hits home. You are already okay. You are the person you're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's about finding that self-compassion, that acceptance. It's crucial.
Absolutely. Life with ADHD, yeah, it has unique challenges, no doubt. But it also comes with unique strengths, different ways of seeing the world.
Definitely. So we hope to take some time, reflect on these insights, see how they might apply to you, or maybe help you understand someone else better.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Take a look at the different paths you're on in your life right now. Which ones genuinely feel aligned with your values? And do you feel like you have the power to choose? Even if it means letting go of some shoulds or expectations.
That's a big question. But that journey of self-discovery, figuring out what truly works for you, well, that definitely continues long after this deep dive ends.